behind me in the Cupra 300. I've had this car for nearly 2 years now, and it still doesn't fail to put a smile on my face whatsoever. It's pretty awesome. Now the thing is with this is, you know, you're getting pretty much everything that you want in terms of the power, but it's all through the front wheels. So the limited slip diff in this car is very good, so you never really find yourself in a situation where you're lacking. DSG gearbox is nice and quick, very responsive. Let's do a launch. Now, I've got Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tyres on this, which greatly help with a launch like that. Now, the only issue that I find is with the sport mode on the transmission is it really does hang the gears. So I'm currently controlling it manually using the paddles on the wheel. I'm not a big fan of this artificial sound that it pumps in Cupra mode. Since I'm going slowly at the moment, I'm going to put it back into the normal comfort mode, which is what I normally run. So it does actually have a adaptive suspension in here. It's got a dynamic chassis control, which is effectively adaptive dampers, so it will soften the car up slightly in comfort mode, and then when you put it into sports and Cupra mode, or individual if you set it up that way, it will stiffen the suspension ever so slightly, so you've got a bit more of an edge in terms of handling. The handling of this car is absolutely brilliant, to be honest. I mean, when you consider the platform it's on, we're used to the Golf R and the S3, which are very planted cars due to four-wheel drive. And the performance is of course pretty much exactly the same as those. They share the same platform, the same engine. The edge I think the Cupra has is actually on track, because the handling in terms of the front wheel drive and the limited slip differential is actually definitely a bit of an edge over the Golf and the S3, and the fact that it doesn't have the four-wheel drive Haldex system means that it is actually more lightweight as well. So you find that when you chuck it into a turn, not only does it grip quite well once you've got the right tyres on it, but actually it does perform quite well in general. It really does have some edge to it, and you can just feel it willing you into the corners. Now I must say, when you first get the car, it normally comes on these Continental Conti Sport tyres, which aren't very wonderful, to be honest. The Cupra is known for wheel hop, and that is effectively, you know, you stamp the throttle, and rather than a bit of wheel spin, you kind of get this sort of bunny rabbit effect where it kind of bounces along because it's trying to put the power down and it's not quite right. That is a combination of things in this car. The first being the tyres, which I've now replaced with the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S, which are considerably better, and also the engine mounts. A lot of people choose to change the mounts and put inserts in to stiffen it up slightly, but of course this can reflect on the ride slightly. And the ride quality overall, if you're just pooling about town, isn't too bad. It definitely isn't a comfortable car in terms of a luxury vehicle, but it's certainly comfortable enough for day-to-day use. Gearbox is an interesting one. This particular car is the Cupra 300, which is the 6-speed DSG. They do come with the 7-speed now, so you've got a bit of wheel hop out there, but the tyres are performing nicely. The slightly newer version has the 7-speed DSG, which I think would be better on the motorways, because you find it does hang quite highly in the rev range when you're doing motorway speeds with a 6-speed. The dual clutch transmission overall is pretty much immaculate in terms of how fast it is. Definitely more so when you're doing things manually, controlling them with your own two hands on the paddles. One thing I do find pretty infuriating is in terms of the gear shifts on the sequential down here, if you're using the lever, up is forward and down is backwards, and that isn't how it should be. In racing cars it's inversed, because you want to be pulling it towards you with the motion as you're going up the gears, and then as you're slowing down, pushing away from you. Now, a lot of cars that aren't performance cars actually have this. I've got a friend with a BMW 5 Series and it is actually inversed. So why Volkswagen Audi Group hasn't done that on these performance hot hatches, I really don't know. I'm currently running the stock exhaust on this car. It has quietened down for the newer 2019 models due to the GPF, so you've got more filters on the exhaust and things like that, so you don't have quite the same sound. But this is probably, out of the three cars, the S3, the Golf R and the Cupra, this is probably actually the loudest of the three when stock, in terms of this particular setup. So you can see you really get some of those nice upshift sounds with the DSG. Now, would I have this over a Golf R or an S3? Absolutely. I think the thing is with this car at the moment is it's such good value. You can pick them up used reasonably cheaply. They come into kind of end of life now, so on lease they are stupid cheap. So really you do get quite a good value, because at the end of the day, you know, you can pick one of these up for sort of £300 a month on lease with no deposit, and they come now with bucket seats as standard and all of the equipment that you see here, the panoramic roof and everything like that. It's all kind of standard equipment now, and I feel as though really you're getting quite a good value for your money. I've driven a Golf R and I've driven an S3, and I kind of found both of them a little bit underwhelming, if I'm honest, mainly on the basis that the four-wheel drive, I think, is too forgiving. Of course, it's great for launches and straight line speed, but when you hit the twisty stuff, some of the roads that I've been experiencing today, I think really you lose a lot of the value of the car, the value of the engine, because four-wheel drive kind of babysits you in a way. In this car, you've got to modulate the throttle a bit. If you don't do that, you kind of end up in a situation where you're all over the place, or you understeer, or, I mean, to be fair, the understeer isn't very bad at all. Once you've started looking at getting better tyres and things like that, you're not really got too much of a problem with understeer. I've got to say, it's quite impressive in terms of some of the corners you can take. It will just grip and go. It's very good, but it's obviously not quite got the straight grip as an S3 or a Golf R. Something you've got to consider as well when you look at those other two cars is not only are they more expensive, but they're more expensive to insure. And I think a lot of that is because of the fact that they're so nickable. At the moment, we've got a real problem in the UK with car theft, especially keyless entry cars. And you'll find a lot of the vehicles that are used in these pursuits and, you know, lots of crime are Golf Rs and S3s. Going back to the gearbox, whilst it is great out on a stretch, it's very good, very responsive in terms of the dual clutch changes. In terms of round town, I think it can be a bit dim-witted. I've driven recently the Mercedes A35 AMG, and the transmission in that, a 7-speed dual clutch transmission in that, is a lot smoother around town. In terms of when you're going slowly creeping, it's very, very silky smooth. Whereas in this car, when you're pooling around town, you do find sometimes that it's a bit jerky. I also find if you're going quite quickly and then you come to a sudden stop, the gearbox kind of almost feels like it wants to stall. There's like a judder as the clutches try and figure out what to do. So that can be quite frustrating. Aside from the gearbox being a bit clunky around town sometimes, and also the very minor Seat attributes that you get in terms of build quality, there are a few creaks and rattles in here. I mean, whilst equipment levels are good, and you've already seen the interior is very nice, in terms of actual build quality, you can see that there's not quite the same premium as you do in, say, an Audi. You get into an S3 and you can immediately tell all the switches feel a little bit nicer, everything's just a bit more solid. I have to say, my favourite thing about this car is it certainly looks a lot different from the standard Leon. It definitely turns heads and people ask what it is. If you know what it is, then you know what it is, and that's great, but it's one of these cars where there's kind of a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing, because people look at it and it's just a Seat, but in actual fact you've got 300 horsepower under the hood, you've got that brilliant limited slip differential which really helps with the front wheel drive system. It's such a willing car when you go and take it on a run. I think on track is where it really shines, because the weight saving from not having the four-wheel drive plus the LSD, it really provides quite a good experience, especially with a nice set of tyres like the ones I've got on here at the moment. To be honest, I spend most of my time in this car just going around town, and I don't really get a chance to come out to a place like this and really stretch its legs. But I got to say, when I do, it's a lot of fun. Bring it out to a national limit road like this and stick it in manual mode. It's a whole different beast to when you're just pottering about town. I apologise for the wind noise at the moment, but I wanted the roof open a little bit just to help you understand what the exhaust sounds like. Yeah, it's you kind of underestimate the power until you take it out properly. I suppose the beauty of a car like this really is you can go about day to day in comfort mode, and it's perfectly serviceable as a day-to-day car. I mean, you can fit the kids in the back, the boot's the standard size for this class, so really it is quite a practical car. But when you take it out and you really stamp on it, you get a bit of a kickback, you hear the turbo kick in. Even standard power, I mean, people run these cars on silly power. They uprate the turbos, get hybrid turbos or whatever. You can just do a simple stage 1 or stage 2 map with a few supporting mods. But really, I don't think you need it. I think it's got enough power the way it is. I mean, if you're going to go silly on track, maybe. But out here in the British countryside, what a great car to have. It always puts a smile on my face. Yeah, it's not quite the same as having a stripped out sports car, and it's not quite got the V8 grunt of the AMG Mercedes or the RS Audis, but you know, it's a nice middle ground. It'll do 30 mile per gallon round town, and it'll do more than that on a run. Insurance isn't too bad, and overall I think you're getting a really good package. So if you're interested in picking up one of these, I'd probably say it's worth looking into over the Golf R or the S3. It's a bit of an underdog, and you can certainly get them cheap. If you go for an older model, a 280, something like that, I mean, yeah, they don't look quite as sharp and they're not quite as well equipped, but you're getting nearly the same package. You can pick them up sort of around the £15,000 mark for a good one. And if you want something a bit more exciting than that, well, then you can wait until you get hold of one of these, a 300 or the current new 290 model. I think if you want a car that you can run around day to day, use as a practical daily, but also occasionally get out on the track or smash around the British B roads, then I think this is actually quite a good option. So I'm approaching a town now. I'm in comfort mode. It's small and agile enough to go through the tight roads, and it's comfortable enough to live with day to day. I said the only thing that really bugs me in a situation like this is that gearbox is a bit like this. But you do get used to it, and it is very common with the Volkswagen Audi Group DSG boxes to feel a bit like that. A friend of mine has a Golf R, and it's fairly heavily modified, probably running upwards of 400 horsepower. And whilst it is an incredible experience straight line, in the corners it feels kind of heavy, it feels kind of lackluster, because you've not quite got that same experience in terms of the front wheel drive. Front wheel drive is very engaging, or it can be. You don't quite have that same feeling that the back's going to suddenly kick out on you like you would in a rear wheel drive car. You're kind of more worried about understeer, but as I said, in this it's not really too much of a problem, because that LSD is fantastic at providing the power where it needs to be. And once you've got a good set of tyres on, the world's your oyster, really. Now, I mean, if you're going to spend this kind of money, is there something that's probably better for you in terms of an overall driving machine? I mean, there's plenty of alternatives, don't get me wrong, but I've really got a soft spot for this car after owning it for 2 years. And if you haven't already driven one, if you've just driven the Golf R and the S3 and you've kind of written them off as too bland, I highly encourage you to drive one of these and see what you think. You find yourself in a few situations where you don't expect it to grip, but it does. And I think that's really appealing, to be honest, because you definitely feel more involved and more engaged with the drive than you do in the four-wheel drive cars. I keep comparing it to the Golf 5 and the S3, but let's be honest, they're the big three. They're on the same platform with the same engine. And really, when you're looking at buying a car in this segment, those are the big three that you're looking at. And of course, you've got new competitors coming in. You've got the i30N, you've got the Civic Type R. Unfortunately, I've not had the pleasure of driving one of those just yet, but I think that I'd enjoy that just as much as I enjoy this, if not more. I love bringing it down to a road like this, you know, just giving it a blip of the throttle. You hear the turbo whistle kick in, you hear the induction, and you can really throw it into some corners, and it just grips and goes. It's very impressive for a front wheel drive car. I mean, I had a Golf GTD before this, as you've probably seen on the channel. That didn't have nearly the same gripping capabilities that this does. They've really worked wonders with the chassis on this and the trickery with the computers. I mean, I find in drive, unless you're in manual mode, the gears kind of like, it changes up, but sometimes a bit too late. It's a bit laggy. If you put it in sport mode, it really kicks down, it hangs the gears a bit, but when you take control manually, I mean, it's incredible. Some of the way it grips, the way it kind of chucks you around side to side. The weight distribution seems very good for a car of this size as well. You know, I've driven plenty of hot hatches, and this one's the one that always gets me smiling. See if we can get some crackles and overrun. There we go, there's a little bit there. There we go. And this is the standard exhaust. It's quite impressive, really, for a standard exhaust. I do quite enjoy it. We're very lucky in Britain to have all of these country roads at a national limit. I mean, you can have so much fun within the realms of the law, and I think also the slightly lower powered cars are kind of set up better for British roads in a way. I mean, if you compare this to something like a 700-800 horsepower beast like a GTR or a V8 C63 or an RS6, I think in terms of that, you can in a way have so much more fun with this, just because of the fact that you can use the power. I mean, in fact, on some roads I think 300 might be too much. I'd like to have a go in a manual one just to see how I compare it. Back into sports mode, down a gear on the paddles. I gotta say, unfortunately I'm not sponsored by Michelin, but PS4S tyres are the way to go. Trust me, if you don't have them on a car like this already, go out and get yourself some. It's absolutely transformed it. On the Continental Conti Sport tyres, it just would not have the full power. There would be lots of wheel hop, there'd be lots of wheel spin. Even with traction fully on, I can pretty much stamp it in first and it'll grip and go. And for a 300 horsepower front wheel drive car, that's an impressive feat. So, final thoughts then. Well, if you're looking for a nice car to lease and you're on a bit of a budget, you can't really go wrong with this. If you're looking for a used buy that kind of does a bit of everything, again, maybe this is for you. Will you go a bit faster in a Golf R or an S3? Yes. Might you be better off getting a big comfy family car and then a little sports car for a couple of grand on the sides as your weekend toy? Maybe, if that's for you. But if you want one car that kind of does a bit of everything, I think this is kind of it. Is it the jack of all trades and the master of none? Well, I'll let you be the judge of that, but if you get a chance to have a go in one, I highly recommend it. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope to be involved in a lot more content soon. I've got some very interesting stuff coming up for you. And really, I just want to get back into the swing of this and get out and enjoy some cars. So if you've got any recommendations for me, if you've got any cars that you'd like me to try out, keep the comments rolling in. I really appreciate the support. Give it a subscribe, a like, thumbs up, all the rest of it. It really helps me out. And you know, we've got a long way to go, but we're slowly growing, and that's down to your support. So thank you very much, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.